we come into the world just fully creative and excited and curious. And what happens to people is we put them through this system, school, and just society in general, that doesn't encourage that, but instead squashes it and shames people for taking risks. If you don't get something right away, then you're going to get squashed. And what we need in order to really help people's creativity, natural creativity, flourish and grow and get stronger is to encourage that risk taking, to give people permission rather than to hold them back and push them down.
Hello, and welcome to episode 263 of the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts, along with strategies for success. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we'll air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform, leave a review or a rating. That would mean a lot to me, and also help others find the show. Tell a friend about the podcast. Help get the word out there that introversion is a beautiful thing. Melissa Dinwiddie is an innovation and culture strategist who helps analytical thinkers tap into their creativity to solve impossible problems. A Juilliard-trained dancer, professional artist for 15 years, and performing jazz singer-songwriter turned keynote speaker, she's the author of The Creative Sandbox Way and Innovation at Work, and creator of Create the Impossible Framework, a three-step approach to building the mindsets that drive innovation. Play hard, make crap, learn fast. Her experiences designing and facilitating programs for teams at organizations like Google, Meta, and Salesforce informed the development of her framework, which blends art, play, and communication to help leaders build creative confidence, collaboration, and resilience. All right. Well, welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, Melissa. Melissa, it's so good to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, David. It's a delight to be with you.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your new book and get into that. But first, just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey to the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, well, it's been
Mm.
quite a journey. Definitely wasn't a straight line, which is probably true for most creative paths. I was actually a really super creative kid. I loved to draw. I loved to sing. All the stuff like that came really naturally, as it does, for kids in general. But as early as I would say first grade, I started noticing other kids' work. And I started comparing my own work really negatively. And by around age 13, I really bought into this story that I wasn't good enough in art and music. And pretty soon I concluded that I just wasn't creative. That's like, that's the conclusion that I drew. And by college, and I stopped making art. I stopped making music. Stopped doing all those, all those things that we label in society as creative. And by college I completely bought into the lie that some people, they're the creative ones and everybody else, they're not. And I was in that everybody else category. I lumped myself in that category. I saw myself as decidedly not creative. And then the turning point came in my late 20s when I stumbled into a calligraphy class, and it was like this light bulb went off and I fell in love with it. And I started practicing obsessively. And within a year, I was doing paid commission work. First, just for some friends who paid me just a little bit of money. And eventually I kind of turned it into, first it was a hobby business, and then it turned into my full-time paid career, turned into a 15-year career as a professional calligrapher and ketubah artist. But even as a professional artist, I really struggled. I was so focused on making perfect pieces for clients, and I was so stuck in this story that every piece I made had to be amazing, it had to make money, that I got really burned out and I lost the joy in the process. It became just a job. And I got really mired in perfectionism and stuck in that same comparison trap that had really had me in its clutches when I was a little kid. And the real transformation happened when I realized that I needed to reconnect with play. The same thing that I had been doing when I was, just a little kid. And I started setting aside just 15 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day for what I call creative sandbox time. That is the time and space when you can just be like a little kid playing in a sandbox, when it's not about money, it's not about impressing people, it's not about winning awards. It's just about exploring, about making messes, and about having fun. And this little teeny tiny commitment really transformed my relationship with creativity. And it ultimately led me to develop the Creative Sandbox Way guideposts, which are the scaffolding of my book, and which eventually evolved into the Create the Impossible framework, three-step framework that I now use with companies. And that forms the backbone of my second book that just came out, Innovation at Work. And what really fascinates me is that the same principles that helped me break through my own creative blocks are precisely what helps teams at places like Meta and Google and Salesforce become more innovative. The obstacles are really the same, it's just at a really different scale.
Yeah. Yeah, we're definitely going to unpack all of that. Um, and I mean, what are the messages? Because you're definitely not alone. There's lots of people that were creative when they were kids and they lose it because there's messages that, oh, well, you're not as good as this person or that person. Where are these messages coming from?
Well, I can tell you, I have a really clear memory of being in first grade, and it might maybe I don't remember if it was first grade or second grade. I remember the teacher. I was felt so proud because the teacher read a story that I wrote. We had some assignment to, write a story, and I wrote a story about a lion, and I felt like, wow, I'm gonna be an author. And she started reading my story, but it was really a way to teach a lesson to the kids about punctuation because she read my story and I hadn't put in enough commas. And so she read it without any pauses. And I remember the feeling of my face as, all the blood just rushed into my face as I was so humiliated and shamed by this teacher reading my story in a way that I at first I thought, oh, she's, she's calling me out as what a good story, what a good, writer I am. But in fact, it was a way to show how terrible I was at punctuation.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was so shamed in that moment. And also remember, in kindergarten when teachers would say, ask a question and everybody raises their hand because they're so excited to participate. And by first or second grade, we quickly learn that if you raise your hand and you don't have the right answer, you get shamed. And this is how we're trained in schools, which is not a way to encourage people to exercise their muscles of creativity because muscles of creativity require risk taking. And when we shame people and beat them down for taking risks, that's quashing creativity. We come into the world just fully creative and excited and curious. And what happens to people is we put them through this system, school, and just society in general, that doesn't encourage that, but instead squashes it and shames people for taking risks. If you don't get something right away, then you're going to get squashed. And what we need in order to really help people's creativity, natural creativity, flourish and grow and get stronger is to encourage that risk taking, to give people permission rather than to hold them back and push them down. And we just all get held back and pushed down. And that's what school systems do to people. And I mean, it's not just the school system, but that is a big place where it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. We're definitely going to get more into this as we discuss your book. But first, you were on the Quiet and Strong podcast and you are a fellow introvert.
I
So when
am.
did you figure out that you were an introvert?
It's a really excellent question. I I'm not entirely sure, but I suspect that it's when I first took the Myers-Briggs assessment, which was probably in high school, maybe junior high. I don't actually remember. But and I have never been really strong on the IE spectrum. I've never been like, they give you I'm just visualizing the results of the assessments that I've taken, and they show you where you are on the IE spectrum. And I like my husband, I think, is probably quite far over on the IE. He's far on the I, and I've always been closer to the cusp, but I have never identified as an extrovert. However, because I'm a performer, because which is more a more recent thing in my life. Well, I was in a couple of musicals in college, and then I started singing in my late 30s. So it's definitely a much more recent thing, and it's basically an adult thing in my life. But because I'm a performer and because for my job, I am often in front of the room. And because I am have learned to be express my or present as pretty comfortable with people in a variety of situations, regardless of how I might be feeling internally, nobody believes I'm an introvert.
Yeah. And
People
then
argue with me, David.
I believe it. And, basically there is a spectrum, but it's not about liking people, not liking people, being
Yeah,
comfortable in the spotlight. It's not about that. It's just that
right.
we're deep thinkers. And sometimes people are just confident their whole lives as introverts. They're outspoken, they know what they need. But really, I'm speaking to those that don't understand their introversion and want to do things. Maybe they want to sing, maybe they want to perform. And that's coming up with strategies, which I'm sure you have done. Strategies like, okay, how am I going to be successful at doing this? And it doesn't make you an extrovert, although that's funny when people try and guess, but it's that they don't know what introversion really is.
Yeah.
It's we're deep thinkers, which is a gift. Lots of strengths come from that, and many performers are
Yes,
introverts.
yes, yes, absolutely. Well, the other thing is, I I have also the way that I have often heard introversion talked about is that introverts get their energy from more being alone or being in small groups and are more drained in like crowds and being in, large groups of people. And that definitely defines, me. I spend all day long alone, except when I'm out, you know, with a client or, performing or leading a session or something like that. And I'm perfectly happy with that situation. I have extrovert friends for whom that would not work at all. I
Yeah,
do not like big crowds. Like New Year's Eve in Times Square would be that would be the last place I would want to go for New Year's Eve. That's not my jam.
yeah. And it's all about discovering what does drain us, how we get our energy back. And
Yeah.
the definition, I don't get drained by all people. I get drained by certain situations and certain people. But
Yeah.
again, even some situations you enjoy could be draining. Like I recorded a podcast earlier today and it was great, but afterward I needed a break.
Yeah,
I needed to recharge.
I totally relate
So
to
it's all
that.
about understanding it, like what's gonna be draining, and then how do I best recharge? That's one of the good strategies to be successful as an introvert.
Yeah, it makes me think about when I was a teenager and just did not have any of this figured out yet. And as a teenager, the cool thing was to, big loud parties and big loud concerts. And my very first concert was a arena stadium. Unfortunately, I didn't understand that it was going to blast my eardrums. I probably have hearing loss as a result of that big concert. I went to a lot of big concerts because that was the thing that everybody did. And it wasn't until I finally went to a much smaller, more intimate concert when I realized, oh, wow, this, this is my jam. This is what I like. I want more of this. That other kind of concert, that's really not what I enjoy.
Yeah,
I had to experience it to realize what, what gave me energy and what drained my energy.
yeah. And again, you gotta just figure out what works for you. I when I was younger, I loved going to big loud concerts. My daughter doesn't believe me because now she's the concert goer and I'm not, but anyway.
Well, and it changes too, right?
Yeah, it changes, yeah,
We
for
change over
sure.
time.
Yeah, for sure. Is there a particular strength you feel like you have because you're an introvert?
That's also a really interesting question. You know, one of the things that I think, coming back to what you said about introverts being deep thinkers, I think I don't know if this is true of all introverts, but I am a serious reader. I have to always I have to always be in the middle of a good book. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately because, empathy has been kind of in in the I don't know, news or sort of discussed lately. Feelings about empathy. Some some figures have said that empathy is a bad thing. I'm of the personal belief that empathy is incredibly vital and important. And I remember learning, I don't know, in the past couple of years that reading fiction is actually a really powerful way to strengthen your empathy muscles. And it doesn't really surprise me that, I read a lot of fiction and I am very involved in a lot of activities that tap into empathy. And, when you read fiction, you are identifying with the various different characters in the stories. And if you read fiction from a wide variety of different, genres and different authors and from different backgrounds, then you you learn a lot about what it might be like to be in different situations. And I think that, it's not necessarily a specific introversion strength, but I think that there's some alignment there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely extroverts read too, but definitely introverts are readers in general.
And also, I think, this not again, not necessarily specific to introversion, but I, one of the things that I have been told by many people is that I'm really good at making them feel comfortable. And I learned that actually, David, during my dating days. There were a few years there where went on a lot of first dates, and I learned that I can have coffee with anybody for half an hour. And I also discovered during that time of my life that I can make anybody feel comfortable. For 30 minutes over coffee, I can make anybody feel comfortable. And again, I don't know, is that related to my introversion. I don't know. Maybe I would be really good at that if I were an extrovert as well, but I'm damn good at listening to people.
Yeah, they often say that introverts are good at listening. And there's many aspects to our personalities. Some people are going to naturally have more empathy than others. Some people are going to approach things more logically, but it's all part of our personalities. And I focus on introversion, extroversion just because it's a 50-50 split in the population and there's still so much misunderstanding. But we also on this show, we talk about many aspects of our personalities that, could have to do with introversion, extroversion or not.
Is it a 50-50 split in the
Yeah.
population?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And people think that number's high, just like you said, some people think you're an extrovert. It's because they don't understand that it doesn't mean quiet and shy.
Right.
It just, because when people say that, it's like, well, I know some shy extroverts, so it's
Yeah.
not the right word. It's shy. If someone's shy, they're shy. But the nice thing is you can overcome shyness and gain confidence if that's a problem for you.
I used to be very shy.
Yeah, me too. And for me, it was getting to understand introversion. That's what gave me confidence, understanding how I work, and it might be different from somebody else, but it comes with strengths. And that helped me overcome shyness and gain confidence. And I'm still going to think deeply and often think and then speak, where my
Mhm.
extroverted friend might be thinking out loud most of the time. You
Yeah.
just got to understand the differences.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I love that. I love, any tool or system that is going to help me understand myself and other people more. I am all about it.
Yeah, very good. So speaking of readers, let's talk about your book. I'm going to read the whole title here. Innovation at Work, 52 Micro Experiments for Brave Leaders Who Want to Unlock Teams or Unstick Teams, Spark Ideas, and Build What's Next. So tell us
That's
about it.
it. Yes. Well, I so here's what's broken. So many leaders in the kinds of companies that I work with have people in their organizations, their team members that they themselves are, they're polishing their slides. They're polishing whatever they're working on instead of testing ideas. They are perfecting their presentations or whatever it is they're working on, while their competitors are shipping. They're shipping their rough prototypes and they're learning what actually works. And another problem, David, that I see all the time is that so many leaders are hesitant to pull their people away from their daily work in order to do some kind of a training or a workshop or a program because they don't want to take time away from, you know, their the important work that their people are doing. So the book is for directors, VPs, managers of leading companies, innovation leaders, product leaders, cross-functional teams, especially those who are tired of what I call innovation theater. And they're craving really practical tools that actually work inside real world constraints. And the 52 micro experiments are designed to be experiments that they can actually run in 5 to 25 minutes in meetings or sessions that they're already doing in their day-to-day work week so they don't have to pull people out away from their desks and they can run them either one a week over the course of 52 weeks. I've also assembled protocols in case they're going through some kind of a crisis. I have 4 different 90-minute or 2-hour protocols that they can run that are made up of several of the experiments combined together. If you do, one micro experiment per team meeting, you can, systematically build those innovation muscles over time. I've also included success indicators, quick reference charts to select experiments by how much time they take, by problem type, by how easy they are to run remotely or in person and various different other ways to choose which experiments to run. Part of this comes from my own experience back when I was a professional artist. I used to think to myself, so when I was a professional artist, I spent so much of my time making art for other people and, had this idea in my head that everything I made had to make money, had to, be really amazing. And so I never made time to make art for myself, which led to me being completely burned out and spending 15 years as a professional artist being really miserable. And I would go year after year after year making these New Year's resolutions. I'm going to set aside one weekend a month or one Friday afternoon a week or, 2 hours a week or whatever it was to just make art for myself, just purely for myself, not for my clients, whatever. And David, it never happened. I would make these goals and I would never do it. And then I would feel really badly about myself. So finally, I decided to make ridiculously achievable commitment.
Mm.
Ridiculously achievable. 15 minutes a day. I mean, stupidly small. And I thought, I mean, this is ridiculous. What could 15 minutes a day actually achieve? But it's better than nothing. And David, it transformed my life because putting 15 minutes a day, and what is that? That's two 2 hours and it's an hour and 45 minutes a week. I think that comes to. I
Yeah,
can't do
yeah,
quickly.
that sounds
An hour.
right.
It's less than 2 hours a week in total. But because a number of things happened, because I was doing a little bit every day, I was mentally immersed in my creativity all the time. And also, I didn't set a maximum of how much time I could put in. So I would get started, I'd get past that starting friction, and I would often keep going. So on some days, I'd spend more than 15 minutes. And also, because I was doing a little tiny bit every day, some days, and I said to myself, it didn't matter what the outcome didn't matter. Think quantity, not quality. So some days I would think, okay, what came out of today's Creative Sandbox play session is crap, but it's okay because I'm going to be doing more tomorrow. So it was that tiny and daily concept that enabled me to make more art in that year. It was actually 11 months of that year since I started on February 1st than I had in the previous decade. And it's that same concept of, and by the way, creativity breeds creativity. So I was also more creative during that year than I had been in the previous decade. So it's that same concept that this, that's what led to this, idea of this book. If I can get leaders in companies to apply that mindset with their teams, then that will help them expand their creativity and their innovation in a real world way. And the activities in here, the experiments in here, yes, they're playful and they're fun, but they're not, you know, and you go overboard. They're real world experiments that they're going to run without feeling like, well, this is too frou-frou, woo-woo, floofy. They're going to get real value out of them. So, and they're also divided into 4 sections based around my Create the Impossible framework, 13 experiments in each section. So, section 1 is play hard. And this is, we have to let ourselves play just like it's not like go to Vegas and get wild. It's, let yourself be like a little kid exploring in the sandbox. This is step one of the Create the Impossible framework. And then step two might be my favorite step, make crap. This is, when everything we make has to be amazing, it's paralyzing. We have to let ourselves be able to less than perfect. We have to let ourselves make crap. We need the crap to fertilize the good stuff. So that's step two, make crap. And then step three is learn fast. Turn every experience into a growth opportunity. Whatever you've learned from that play hard and the make crap steps, turn that into data. That's step three, learn fast. And then part four of the book is create the impossible, tying it all together. So those are the four pieces, for parts of the book, 13 experiments from each. And there's a little prose section at the front that has a little bit of my story woven in as well.
Very good. So just talk a little bit more about the problem and how this solves the problem. Like, what do organizations look like when they stifle creativity? And then what do they look like if they're doing these kinds of things?
Yeah, so, you know, you can't be competitive if your people are stuck in that polishing mode, or if it's also really hard for people to be creative if they think they're not. So if you got those two things happening, if people are constantly polishing, but they're not actually testing ideas, and if they're thinking like, well, I can't actually be creative, the people over there, the ones who are labeled as the creatives, they're the ones who get to do the creative things. I'm That's not my role. You're really shooting yourself in the foot. So those are the big challenges happening for inside of companies. And the fix is when you integrate these little tiny experiments that feel fun and playful, but they're very functional, they're very strategic, and they're very short in terms of how much time they take on a, day-to-day basis, but they really unlock creativity and they unlock weeks of forward momentum. And they compound as well. So, they layer on top of each other. So they just expand creativity throughout your organization as you continue to, try one experiment one week and then add another experiment the next week and another experiment the next week. And here's the thing, there's science behind all of this. Perfectionism, often, we turn to perfectionism. We think, that's improving quality because I'm just, making sure that everything's as perfect as it can get. But perfectionism doesn't improve quality. It activates the brain's threat detection system, which what that does is it shifts resources away from creative exploration towards error prevention.
Hmm.
And when teams get into explore mode instead, they generate more novel ideas than teams that are stuck in protect mode. So that's what we want to do. We want to get teams into explore mode. And that's what these types of experiments will help to do.
Yeah, so that's definitely an issue, the perfectionism,
Yep.
being afraid to fail as well. How do how do how do we overcome that perfectionism?
That is such a huge, huge question. And that really comes down to, I see it as a cultural issue and a leadership issue. Leaders really need to model vulnerability and imperfection themselves. If leaders require perfection of themselves and of their teams, you are really screwed. So, psychological safety has been proven as one of the most essential elements in a high functioning team. And so, establishing that psychological safety is so key. So, you know, reframing failure as data is really, really important. Learning fast from that data, ensuring that anybody who has any kind of a failure is never shamed and never punished for any kind of a failure, but celebrating failure as learning. This is so critical. There's a lot of lip service given to that, but then people end up getting punished for failures, which really you're shooting yourself in the foot when you do that. So that's really huge. And again, modeling imperfection as a leader is a very, very big way that you can really help, create that culture that makes people feel safe so that, to take risks themselves.
Yeah, and that's often hard for leaders to do because
Very
the
much
leader
so.
wants to appear perfect.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
psychological safety is definitely something important, and we've talked about it. But just tell us, for those that don't know what is psychological safety?
Psychological safety is an environment in which people know that they are not going to be shamed or punished for, standing out, for asking a question, for taking a risk, for, making a mistake, for raising their hand, any of those types of things. When you have psychological safety, people have no fear of taking risks, raising their hand, saying, pointing out, hey, there's a problem here. There, people will feel no sense of fear to do any of those things. That is psychological safety.
Yeah. And as you're talking, we talk a lot about strengths on this show, and when you're allowed to do that and you feel safe to do that, you also feel so much more fulfilled in what you're doing.
Yeah.
You feel like it's so much more rewarding to work in your strengths and feel like you can try things. And I like how you said make crap, because that's the way we learn. We have to fail sometimes, that's the only way, you
It
know.
is. It is absolutely the only way we learn. I mean, think about, I know this is an overused metaphor, but think about when we were learning to walk. The only way we learn how to walk is by falling on our butts, over and over again. And I think I'm thinking back to when you asked me about my strengths as an introvert. And again, I don't think this necessarily has anything to do with introversion or extroversion, but I do know that one of my superpowers is vulnerability, is the ability to make myself vulnerable in public. And that, like, it doesn't feel, I don't know what, it doesn't feel extraordinary to me because it's just who I am. But people comment to me about it frequently, and and I think like I was just sharing how, like, as a leader, share your failures and da da da. And to me that seems just normal. But I do understand intellectually that for a lot of people, like you said, they want to appear perfect. They want to appear like they never make mistakes, et cetera, et cetera. But in fact, they're going to actually be much stronger, more effective leaders, more admired leaders. People are going to be much more willing to follow them anywhere if they allow themselves to be vulnerable, if they allow themselves to show their imperfection. That's just reality.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question for you. How do you manage your energy as an introvert? And as far as like your work, do you allow yourself time to be creative, time alone to be creative?
So, as far as managing energy, it's okay. So, a few things that I can say. I prioritize sleep, which wasn't always the case. I eat really well, and I'm religious about getting 10,000 steps a day. So, those are a few things that I do. There are a lot of other things that I could do much better. It is a constant challenge. And also, talking about what we were talking about before, I'm very self-aware, and I'm constantly looking at what drains me and what nourishes me, and thinking about, okay, do I do XYZ or do I do ABC? And having to make tough choices sometimes because of, asking myself those questions. I don't always do the most, correct thing in terms of my energy, but I'm always looking at those, looking at, I'm always assessing. Let's just put it that way. So that's the answer to that question. I would love to tell you that I have been also religious about giving myself 15 minutes a day. And the reality is that I fall off the wagon all the time. And I am currently on I have been on an off the wagon place for a long time, which pains my heart so much. The other challenge here, David, is that I am what I call a passion pluralite. I have a lot of different creative passions. I am a musician, I'm a visual artist, I'm an improv performer. I have lots of different ways that I like to creatively express myself, and there's not enough hours in the day for me to do all of them. And so right now I'm playing music. I recently took up the upright bass a few years ago, and so I have been prioritizing playing bass, and I fall off the wagon on that as well. And I've been struggling with some physical maladies around that as well. In any case, so it's very challenging because I have not made, and you would think 15 minutes a day would be no problem, but I've not made the 15 minutes a day for visual creative play, but I have been making music. So that's where I have been putting my creative expression time. We could talk more about that because part of the visual challenge is I don't have any place to put art. Like I used to make art on canvas. I don't have any place to put it. I'm not interested in selling and marketing and selling it. So there's that a whole other issue around ecological what to do with the art that one makes. So what art do I want to make if I can't? What do I do with it? Anyway, I don't know. Does that answer your question? It got very long and rambly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Melissa, this has been a great conversation. Is there anything else that you want to add before we go today?
I just love that you're doing this because I think, even with so much more attention for introverts than we've ever had, with the book Quiet and so many other introvert creators out there, I think it's so important that introverts get some focus. So I'm so glad that your podcast exists.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on today and talking about it. Where can people find out more about you, your book, the work you do, Melissa?
Thanks so much for asking, David. So you can always find me at my website, which is my name, melissadinwiddie.com. You can download a preview of the book at innovationatworkbook.com/preview. You can find me on LinkedIn at my name, Melissa Dinwiddie, linkedin.com/in/Melissa Dinwiddie. You can find me on YouTube at Melissa Dinwiddie, and you can sometimes find me over on Instagram at this one breaks the pattern at a_creative_life.
Okay. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you. I hope you take the time to explore other episodes and learn from other amazing guests. Remember, if you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there is now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including the four-letter Myers-Briggs code. I'll add a link in the show notes. And I'd love to connect with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the quietandstrong.com website, which includes blog posts and links to social media for Quiet and Strong and much more. Send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. So many great things about being an introvert, and so we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.